show, The Mutual Fund Show.
The Mutual Fund Show Anniversary Special, only on Bloomberg Quint.
Good morning, you're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint. I'm Darshan Mehta. Joining me on the show is Agam Vakil. Agam will speak about the FNOQs. I'll talk about the general trade setup. And as of now, the SX Nifty has managed to slip from the highs of the day. Overall, if you're looking at the US markets, not the best of close. We had 0.3% drop as far as the Dow is concerned. Most of the European indices also ended with a negative bias. The Japanese market have managed to inch up higher, but the Hong Kong markets are down close to 0.5%. So across the board, it's a weak or a muted start that you can expect. Coming back to the Indian market, the SGX Nifty is up just 6 points. At one point of time, it was trading up 40 points. So there seems to be a little bit of cooling off that's happened, but still above the 10,500 mark in trade. Because of how the rupee has been behaving against the dollar, the IT companies, some of the pharma companies are doing well. Infosys was up 2.5%, 0.5% gain for Dr. Reddy's. What didn't do well were counters, like Wipro and Vedanta, and Tata Motors, obviously on account of the numbers that came out. Now, crude was down almost 1.5% in trade yesterday. It's managed to recover, or no, it's not managed to recover also. So it's trading below the $79 barrel per mark as far as the Brent is concerned, and below the $71 barrel per mark on the WTI. If you're looking at most of the commodities, what happened on the LME, it was a slight positive close that happened, because if you're looking at the commodities on the LME, and that will come up, we're seeing that most of the commodities did manage to inch up in trade. So aluminium, copper, zinc, nickel, lead, all of them were up. The only exception was tin, which is down 1%. Most of the base metals in China have also opened on the positive side. Muted start for the precious metals. Both gold and silver are down in trade. Now, yesterday the Nifty managed to move up significantly, but the FI still were net sellers. They sold in almost 700 crores. The DI has bought in almost 1400 crores in the cash market. Now, if you're looking at what the sectors did, the Nifty was up in trade, but there was selling that was seen on the mid cap and small cap end as well. Now, Pharma, IT have moved because of how the rupee has been behaving. The PSU banks post the SBI numbers has been rather strong in trade. Auto and real estate were the two sectors that didn't do well in trade. Now, coming to the VIX crashed almost 7% since the market was rather strong in trade. The Nifty was up almost 83 points. What contributed was Infosys, TCS. So the IT pack doing well on how the rupee. HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank also doing well. Tata Motors falling in trade post the numbers, and ONGC, because of the additional tax burden that could come in, was down in trade. But Agam, what are the FNOQs indicating?
Well, we saw the Nifty move up above the mark of 10,500. We've seen short covering in a lot of areas of the market, including the Nifty futures, where we saw a 2% decline when it comes to the Nifty Bank futures too. A 1% decline coming in as far as open interest is concerned. The India Volatility Index fell below the mark of 7, or by as much as 7% below the mark of 14. And in terms of changes in open interest, we've seen more writing in the 10,500 put and some resistance building in the 10,700 call, as you can see here. That said, two stocks you're watching out for, Jet Irrigation and Jet Airways, move into the FNO ban. Expect restricted trade there. Weakness in both these counters, but strength in Bharti Airtel, one of the top Nifty gainers yesterday, where we saw short covering as a 16% decline in open interest, another 17% increase in open interest for Just Dial, even as a short made advances with stock moving up by as much as 6.3%. So these are just some of the stocks and indices that we can keep an eye on. But now let's go across to Bloomberg's Paul Allen for the top 8 international headlines.
The European Union says any US plan to slap tariffs on auto imports would violate World Trade Organization rules. Brussels says it's still assessing President Trump's call for restrictions, but insists cars are no threat to national security. Washington will decide by the start of next month whether to impose duties on steel and aluminium, and the EU says it still hopes to find a solution.
It obviously would be against the WTO, and it's very difficult to imagine it to create any sort of threat to the national security. So it's very difficult to understand. But we have now just read what has been said, and there is a long
Bank of England Governor Mark Carney says his often criticised policy guidance is more important than ever as Brexit enters its final phase. Carney used a speech in London to review the history of his comments and explain why his methods work. He spoke just hours after his deputy told Bloomberg the bank doesn't have a communication problem, although forecasting has become more difficult since the Brexit vote. Rusal says Oleg Deripaska has resigned as non-executive director, effective immediately. It follows Thursday's departure of the CEO and most of the board as the Russian aluminium giant tries to persuade Washington to lift sanctions. Rusal has warned it may not be able to continue operations beyond October 23rd. The US imposed a deadline for banks and business partners to end their contracts. The US Justice Department is said to have opened a criminal investigation into whether traders have been manipulating the price of Bitcoin and other digital currencies. We're told the inquiry is looking at illegal actions that could move prices, such as spoofing or flooding the market with fake orders to fool other traders. Bitcoin extended its declines after Bloomberg reported the investigation. Global news 24 hours a day on air and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Paul Allen. This is Bloomberg.
Based on the recent statement of North Korea, I have decided to terminate the planned summit in Singapore on June 12th. While many things can happen and a great opportunity lies ahead potentially, I believe that this is a tremendous setback for North Korea and indeed a setback for the world. If and when Kim Jong-un chooses to engage in constructive dialogue and actions, I am waiting.
I think the chances of a summit between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump are exactly the same today, right now as we speak, that they were yesterday. The fact that Donald Trump is canceled is, yes, something that the news media and all of us here are going to talk nonstop about. But again, the chances of the summit happening, maybe not June 12th in Singapore, but at some point are probably just as likely today as they were yesterday. The reason I say that is because the bluster that is happening, this is megaphone diplomacy coming from both sides, which are, they claim they're very good at it. This is an old tactic as well from the North Koreans, and that is ramp up the tension just before then to get maximum concessions ahead of the summit, okay?
You could argue he called his bluff in a way.
That Donald Trump did. Yeah, Donald Trump said, well, okay, well, you're going to do that. I'm going to cancel before you have a chance to up the concessions.
So what happens next? Do we ratchet back to 2017 and the hostilities we had at that point?
Well,
Rocket Man.
Again, this is that megaphone diplomacy. The U.S. will use that as an opportunity to gain their concessions from the North Koreans as well. The threat of military has always been there. The threat for maximum economic pressure has always been there and can continue to ramp up. And again, now not Donald Trump, but perhaps Kim Jong-un is on his back heels saying, we need the reprieve from the sanctions. We do want the face from the summit with Donald Trump. Now we're getting those statements coming from the KCNA, which are very different than what we've been getting for the last week or so.
Rather conciliatory, aren't they?
Yeah.
Steve, does this lessen the impact of North Korea saying that it's dismantled the nuclear testing site, or was that kind of just for good pictures anyway?
Yeah, it was going to be a show anyway, because the North Koreans could move their nuclear testing to a different remote mountain site if they wanted to. But these are the pictures we're getting out of this week when the international media, select group of international media, were invited to the northeast of the Korean peninsula, Punggye-ri nuclear testing site, where they did conduct all those 6 nuclear tests. They imploded the 6, or the many tunnels, I guess, where the different tests were that took place. But many people had said that these tunnels had mostly imploded and caved in on themselves anyway after the last test in September.
No independent verification.
No independent verification. Well, I can bet right now they've probably collapsed. But again, this was for show. And again, Donald Trump has perhaps trumped this show, because this is a side story to Donald Trump's cancellation of the summit.
I think it's very important to keep in mind that one doesn't get, sort of carried away with the historical parallels, because things are very different now. In the old days, EM essentially had fixed exchange rates, pretty hard fixed exchange rates. And so when the exchange rate did start to move, and even if it moved a little bit, you got all of these borrowers in foreign currencies come out of the woodwork that, whose debt suddenly went up. I would point out that the dollar, began to rise in August, September 2011, rose for 3 years till the summer of 2014. EMFX depreciated. It then went vertical for the next 9 months, courtesy of the ECB. And there's been a long time for people who had unhedged FX exposures to come out of the woodwork. And they haven't. So does it create pressure? Yes. I would argue what we are seeing is, a continuation of basically several large positioning moves that began basically late January, early February. You've seen it in U.S. equities. You've seen it in EM equities. You've seen it in the dollar against the euro. You're seeing it in EM currencies. So positioning is playing a big role. I'm not really in a hurry, basically, to read this as, a big change in the fundamentals. So the small increase in interest rates, I would argue EM is prepared for. We are overweight EM equities and local currencies relative to the U.S. Remain so, and happy to be so.
Well, back to Indian equity markets. Stock of the day is Sudarshan Chemicals. Now, the pigment manufacturer with a market capitalization of 3,100 crore has reported good set of numbers. If you look at the top line growth, we're looking at a 31% uptick there. Net profit too has shot up for this company by as much as 32% year-on-year basis to a number of 23 crore as compared to 17 odd crore. We have seen healthy operational performance creeping into this counter. EBITDA is up as much as 70%. Margins have expanded by 330 basis points to around 14.6% as compared to a number of 11.3% that we've seen in the March quarter of the previous year. What has led to good show by the company? Well, cost-saving techniques and higher revenue clearly has reflected into good show on operational front by this company. Other expenses as a percent to your net sales, that figure has come down to 2.4% that we've seen earlier. This is as compared to other expenses have declined to 20.6% as compared to 23% that we've seen earlier. Also, if you look at employee benefit expenses, that as a percent to your net sales, they have come down to 5% as compared to 7%. Besides that, we also have the other income which has actually weighed on the bottom line performance of the company. We've seen another loss of around 3.98 crore as compared to the income that we've seen in the base quarter. In terms of segmental performance, pigment segment, which is the main segment, 98% of the total revenue, that has almost grew by 21% year-on-year basis, while the other segment has risen as much as 11% for this counter.
And amongst the stocks that we're tracking in trade today are some of the companies which reported numbers after market hours. Strong set of numbers coming in from United Spirits. Now, the company did see a revenue growth of 7%, but we did have a net profit of 211 crores as compared to a loss of 104 crores in the previous corresponding quarter, which of course was on account of a one-time loss. But even if you look at the 211 crore profit for this quarter, that has beat analyst estimates. On the other hand, EBITDA margin came in at about 12.6%, so that's strong numbers from United Spirits. Moil also reported a strong set of numbers. Revenue growth of 57%, so very strong top line growth. Net profit growth of just about 10%, mainly restricted on account of a higher tax outgo. But even if you look at the operational performance, EBITDA grew by a good 42%, so watch out for that name as well. Yet another company reporting good set of numbers was Kaveri Seeds, a revenue growth of 5%. The net loss has narrowed to 18 crores. The last corresponding quarter also had a one-time exceptional item on a which led to that huge loss, but even adjusting for that, it's a good, the loss has narrowed. That apart, the company has also announced a buyback at a price of 675 per share. So that would probably lead to a sharper reaction on the stock, apart from the earnings reaction itself. Weak set of numbers coming in from Triveni Engineering, in line with what we have seen for some of the other sugar companies. Revenues fell by about 18%, and we saw a big EBITDA loss coming in at 114 crores compared to a profit in the previous year quarter. Net loss also a sizable one for this counter. So those are the numbers that we're tracking on the back of earnings. The other part, you have Avenue Supermarts, where the company has informed that the promoter Radhakrishna Damani has completed the sale of 1% stake in the company in the 21st May to 24th May period. In fact, yesterday also we saw a bulk deal where he sold some stake. This is majorly for him to achieve a minimum public shareholding requirement. Gayatri Projects is the other one. They have received a letter of award for a highway project in Telangana worth 425 crores. And lastly, we are tracking Shelley Engineering. Now that is on the back of a bulk deal where HDFC Mutual Fund has once again bought some stake, 2.4% in the company. The seller, on the other hand, was DSP BlackRock Emerging Star Fund. So watch out for some of these names.
Okay, Sun Pharma will be reporting numbers today. On the top line, we are seeing a decline of almost 6%. On the bottom line, we are seeing a decline of 33%, and margin decline to the tune of 18%, which will mean margins will come in at close to 21.6%. Taro, which is their US subsidiary, which forms 50% of their US sales and 15% of the total top line, that has already reported numbers which came in better than what the street was anticipating. The management has guided for a flattish growth on a quarter-on-quarter basis, and for the fourth quarter, they are anticipating margins to the tune of 20 to 22%. So pretty much what in line with what we have also put out this time around. US market, the pricing pressure will continue. Competition is clearly there in the US markets, and that is denting overall US business. But volume decline in Absorica and market share loss in Glumetza are something that could dent the US markets. The saving grace comes in from the launch of Coreg, which will actually partially offset some of the weakness there. India, we are seeing a single-digit growth that could come in, and single-digit growth is also expected in the API and rest of the world market. So, but overall, expect a muted set of numbers from Sun Pharma.
After the PTI report suggested that the government is exploring option to levy a windfall tax or a similar cess on companies like ONGC and Oil India, which benefit from rising crude prices. Remember, there has been outrage in the public because of rising fuel prices, and if the government was to cut fuel prices, which is basically cut diesel and petrol prices by 4 rupees per litre, the total revenue loss for the government in excise duties could be in excess of 50,000 crores. And in order to compensate for the 50,000 crore revenue loss, the government could put a windfall tax or probably a cess on companies like ONGC and Oil India. Now, not only that, the market did not like the recent acquisition of HPCL as well. The shares of HPCL have been sliding down, and not only that, the company spent nearly 35,000 crores plus in order to acquire HPCL, and most of that was funded via debt. So, we have incremental pressure on interest costs outgo. Not only that, on the valuation front, CLSA believes that the stock is currently pricing in a valuation of $50 to $55 per barrel in terms of oil price, despite the fact that oil is above $80 per barrel. So the remainder valuation gap is simply because the market believes that the subsidy mechanism or a windfall tax is in the offing, and probably that is the reason why we had a sharp reaction in the stock coming in for the trade.
Thing is, when these crude prices were falling, all the windfall gains were made by the government in terms of that they kept on increasing the excise duty time and again. 9 doses were done, more than 11 rupees per litre on petrol and more than 13 rupees a litre on diesel. They got collected in various doses of the rises in a 1.5 year period. And every time government kept on saying, if in case the crude prices rise again, they will give the relief for the excise duties. Now the government says that they are not in a position to give the relief because based on those revenues, government has launched various ambitious social welfare schemes, infrastructure projects. Well taken. It's not the government has pocketed the money. They are using it for a legitimate and welfare programs. I'm not doubting that. But the issue comes that should they do it? What signal it will send to international investor community when this recent open acreage licensing policy is launched?
Yes, after the much-awaited EV policy announcement in Maharashtra, our sources tell us that the state government is expected to receive an investment of over 10,000 crore in the EV space. The state has already received about 3 to 5 proposals, and it's in talks with these vehicle manufacturers to finalize these proposals. Out of these, the big companies such as M&M, JSW Energy, Tata Motors have already submitted their proposals. Now, if you remember, M&M has committed to invest about 500 crore in this space, and our sources tell us that the government has already finalized its proposal. Tata Motors, whereas it is also eyeing a similar kind of investment of about 500 to 600 crore, but it is yet the government and Tata Motors are still in talks to finalize this proposal. As far as JSW Energy is concerned, it is expected to invest about 10,000 crore in its EV plan. Now remember, JSW Energy has also signed a similar agreement with Gujarat government. It has signed an MOU with the Gujarat government, but now it remains to be seen which way JSW Energy takes its EV plans forward. But as far as Maharashtra government is concerned, it is eyeing a good amount of investment in this EV space, where it plans to support about 5 lakh electric vehicles in the next 5 years.
Okay, 2 important brokerages for today. First of all, it's CLSA on GAIL, which has upgraded the stock to a buy from a sell and raised the target price to 405 from the earlier 337. They have said that bunched up expenses and lower gas trading profit led to a 20% miss as far as profits were concerned. But the recent crude price spike is something that will benefit. It not only eliminates the US LNG risk but also boosts the core EPS. They're saying that the China demand and crude spike has turned US LNG from a headwind to the tailwind, and they believe several imminent triggers that are there for the stock, and the stock is ignoring the crude spike gain. Kotak Institutional Equities has come with a report on City Union Bank, where they've raised the target price to 190 from the earlier 180, and they maintain an ad. They're saying healthy operating growth profit with stable performance on most metrics. The ROE improvement still looks unlikely because the ROE has been close to 15%, but the consistent performance has been maintained, and they value the bank at 2.5 times book and 16 times PE on a 2020 EPS.
The EU is introducing new rules which will dramatically impact how companies collect, store and use data. It's called the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. Coming into effect on May the 25th, it applies to any company that collects personal data of EU citizens. So what will change for customers? Instead of fine print and legal jargon, companies will have to post clear notices and get unambiguous consent to collect personal information. That includes credit card numbers, travel records, and even biometric data from wearable fitness monitors. And these rules don't just apply to social networking sites and search engines. It affects schools, property management companies, and even scout groups. If there's a breach, companies with more than 250 employees need to notify authorities within 72 hours and alert customers. So situations like Uber's attempts to cover up its 2016 data hack will now be punishable with huge fines. Just how huge? Up to $24.8 million, or 4% of global annual revenue. For a company with worldwide sales of $100 billion, that could mean penalties of $4 billion in certain circumstances. That's a pretty good incentive to comply, and firms are scrambling to make sure they'll meet the deadline.
Several stories you'll find on the website bloombergquint.com. If you do log on, you'll of course find all the live market action over the course of the day, so check it out. There are several stories right now that you can read. Here are just a couple of them. Union Oil Minister Dharmendra Pradhan said the government is deliberating on an immediate solution to deal with rising fuel prices. One option is to bring petroleum products under the purview of the goods and services tax. That would significantly reduce the effective tax rate on petrol and diesel, which currently stands at over 100% for petrol. In 2013, this was about the 40% mark. The Enforcement Directorate has filed its first charge sheet in the Punjab National Bank fraud case. The law enforcement agency stated that over 6,400 crore rupees of bank funds were laundered abroad to dummy companies by Nirav Modi and others. It has also alleged that a sum of $50 million out of the total was diverted to Modi's father, Deepak Modi, who is reported to be based in Antwerp, Belgium. And the Telecom Department has cleared the sale of standalone mobile towers of Idea Cellular for 4,000 crore rupees to the Indian arm of American Tower Corporation, paving the way for the merger of Idea and Vodafone India. That's all you need to know going to trade today. Do check out the website for a lot more. Up next on Bloomberg Quint is Indian Open. Thanks so much for watching.